for the Ethiopian Educational Information and Communication Technology presents Educational Satellite Television Programs.
Hello, teacher. Hello, students. Welcome to today's lesson on rule of law and conflict prevention and conflict management. Last time, we learned about some of the harmful consequences that arise from an absence of rule of law within society. I am sure you can recall some of the things we discussed. To remind you, we talked about anarchy and arbitrary rule. We also learned that an absence of rule of law results in a lack of accountability. In this lesson, we will turn our attention to the relationship between rule of law and conflict prevention and management. There are several ways that rule of law helps us to avoid conflict or to deal with conflict in a productive and positive manner. This promises to be an interesting and important lesson, students. Are you ready? The textbook explains that conflicts happen in the normal course of human interactions. Let us define conflict. Conflict means disagreement that arises due to differences that can result from divergences of interests in a society. Conflict can take several forms. It can mean an incompatibility between two opinions. It can also mean a serious disagreement or argument, which can last for a long time. Sometimes, conflicts escalate into armed struggle between two groups. Students, take a few minutes to think about two different examples of conflict. First, think of an example of a conflict that is relatively easy to resolve. Next, think of a conflict that is very serious and is much less easily resolved. Be specific in your answers, students.
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
That is the end of our activity time. Thank you for your participation. I wonder what different examples you considered. An example of a conflict that is relatively easy to resolve might be a disagreement that takes place between a group of students over a concept or an idea. Sometimes a conflict like this can be resolved by conducting an experiment to see who is correct about the answer. Other times, ideas are neither right nor wrong. A conflict over an idea can be resolved when people take the time to explain clearly what they think. This develops understanding between people, even if it does not ultimately lead to agreement. An example of a conflict that is much more difficult to resolve might arise between two countries over the use of a natural resource, such as the Blue Nile. Ethiopia shares the Blue Nile with Egypt and Sudan. The use of the water has been organized according to old treaties signed in colonial times. This means that a conflict over the use of the Blue Nile is rooted in a complex history. It will take time, patience, and effort to resolve. Conflicts arise between individuals, groups, and nations. No matter what the nature of the conflict is, it can be resolved when people respect and obey the values and principles stated in the Constitution. In other words, rule of law helps people to resolve conflicts. Groups may disagree about boundaries, grazing land, water, and other resources. If we desire to resolve these conflicts legally, we have to adhere to the Constitution and to rule of law. Students, one way to resolve conflicts peacefully is to try to identify common beliefs, interests, and goals. This is helpful because when we understand what we have in common with another person or group, we can begin to work with one another rather than against one another. If we realize that we each have the same goals, we can determine how to achieve these goals together. And, as you know, students, two are stronger than one. Let us think of an example. Suppose a conflict arose about the use of a piece of land. One group believes that the land has cultural or geographical significance and should be preserved. The other group wishes to build on the land as a business opportunity. How would identifying the common beliefs, interests, and goals help in the resolution of this conflict? What might these two groups have in common?
Students, let's get ready. Begin. Time's up. Let's get back to our lesson.
Welcome back. These two groups apparently have opposite opinions. However, perhaps they share a common goal. Perhaps they each desire the economic development of Ethiopia. One group believes that preserving the land as a heritage site will bring in tourists who will pay to visit it. The other group believes that establishing a business on this land will promote economic growth. Once they have identified their common goal, they can start to work together to achieve it. Perhaps part of the land could be used to start a business selling local handicrafts to tourists. This might be a way of using the land that is beneficial for both groups. Just as conflicts can be resolved by identifying common interests, so too conflicts can be reduced if people try to work together to solve common problems. As soon as you share the same goals with someone, it is easier to work with that person harmoniously. Students, we have learned about the relationship between rule of law and conflict resolution and management. Next time, we will learn about limited and unlimited governments. Until then, thank you, teacher. Thank you, students.